Welcome to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast, which features two faculty members who love tech and love making it part of their work. I'm Marty, an associate professor at Kent State University.
And I'm Eric Perry, faculty at Kaiser University.
Eric, you've started your new job, so you're done with your finals. You're just starting the semester up. This is the last possible day for me to submit my grades. So with relatives in last week for my son's graduation and a whole bunch of cooking to do and my dog's hind leg surgery, I'm grading to the last minute, which is not something I like to do because grading is dreadful for me. So it's all been compressed into one long, dreadful day, except for this. This is the one thing that I think, wow, this is going to be fun. I get to break up my day with Eric talking about backups and how we manage backups. I work with a group, or I'm part of a group of a Mac users group. You have to understand Mac users groups right now. Mac users groups started back in the 70s, and they were sort of like hobbyists groups. And the ones that have continued to continue on have generally very, very old members. And I cannot drill into the head that they need to do backup and how to do backup. So, I have great guys. They're wonderful guys, but they don't think about backup. Their questions are, I can't connect with my photos, or I lost this setup, and it's a little frustrating because it's like the first question is, where's your backup? Don't do it. So we decided to talk about backup today, not only for people in your life that are losing things digitally and they want you to come up with some magic to bring them back, but also for the work that you do as an academic. How do you save that, store it, keep it safe? And I hope, Eric, you'll talk a little bit about the sensitivity of some of the stuff that we're working with in terms of FERPA and regulations, particularly in counseling and with clients, kind of the safety that you have to do with backup. I don't work with clients, and I don't save or store off-site and off our office computer any student-sensitive material, which is probably the first rule of thumb. Don't do that. Keep it within your university system. Can you add to that?
Yeah, I think so. First, backup and storage is something I'll always pay for. And anyone who's listened to this for a while knows that I'm cheap. So I'll take the free route. I'll take the, kind of annoying ad-supported stuff if I have to. But storage is something that I'll always pay for. And similarly, backup. I think when we're talking about storage and backup, though, there's levels to this. Like Marty was saying, there's our student records, and most of those things happen in like a web-based platform. They're not stored locally on your computer, nor should they be. But you may have a device that's provided by your university that allows you to store some of that data. Maybe you work on scheduling and, different things, different administrative tasks that involve some of that sensitive data. But if that's the case, then you'll have training around how specifically you're supposed to handle that information. FERPA and HIPAA are really similar in terms of the security requirements and ways in which you need to secure that data. I think HIPAA can be a little bit more stringent in terms of process and procedure. So, I have a web-based system that I can access with my schedule and client information, but again, nothing is stored locally. And they'll have you install apps or allow permissions for them to remotely control your devices if you're going to handle any type of sensitive data there. At least that's the process they should have. No physical files should be taken off site. So that's something that went away a long time ago. But if you do have physical files, those generally have to be locked away, and they have to be locked away under 2 locks, physical locks. So perhaps in a room and then stored in a locking file cabinet, right? So there's your 2 locks that you could store that behind. Digitally, though, there's alternatives that keep your data safer and ensure that you don't have a breach, help to ensure that you don't have a breach when they're managed offsite. Again, in a web-based platform is probably the safest way to go about it, and usually managed by something like an EHR, an electronic health record. So you'll have that access to that as a clinician. As a faculty, most of the grading is handled in 2 separate systems. So grades and student information are handled in your student information management system, and there's several examples of those. And that's different from your learning management system where you actually input your grades. It's likely that you probably put your final grades in this separate system, but you probably grade in somewhere like Blackboard or Desire to Learn or something like that, if you're required to maintain a grade book there. So backing up information on web-based systems is not as vital because you have another provider who's responsible for that. The kind of other part that I wanted to talk through is that personal part, the part that you were talking about, Marty. How do I keep my stuff when I can't access it? Where does it go? Backups are really important. If you're working on papers, you're working on submissions for conference proposals, you have pictures, you have things that are meaningful in the digital world, you need to find a way to save those. I've switched rather recently into the Google Sphere and the Google Space. So I pay for Google Drive space, mostly because that's the environment that most of the institutions I've dealt with use. So there's some availability in that. Anybody who uses Canvas, there's an LTI or an integration for Google Drive within Canvas. So it's much, much easier to have students submit files that way and to be able to work through Google Drive. And I think just the interface with PC and the Chromebooks I have has made Google Drive really, really easy for that kind of personal storage space. We do have some Apple users in the house.
Yep.
So, different platform and way of doing that with Apple. So
yeah, I have a tendency to overkill. Surprise, surprise. And there's this strategy that they talk about that I think is a good rule of thumb called the 3-2-1 strategy, where the backup rule of data protection strategy there recommends 3 copies of data, 2 on site and 1 off site. And so when you're talking about the original data, you have it on your computer. That's your primary device. And then you have 2 copies, be stored in different types of media, such as on a PC, an external hard drive. I've got lots of SSD drives that I use for particular projects or video projects. I'll store as a backup on those drives. USB flash drives, a DVD, NAS. I've got an NAS storage, and then cloud storage devices. You can also make copies of things and just take them to your office. I mean, I'm at home. I've got a bunch of material here and storage. I also have cloud storage. But if my house goes up in flames, am I going to run in and save my family, or am I going to grab all of my storage devices and my computer to make sure everything's safe? So it's always good to have something offsite in that process. But for offsite storage, the computer that I do most of my production on, I use a service called Backblaze, and that runs in the background. There was another service, I can't remember what it was. Eric, maybe you remember. It starts with a C, and I was trying to do a search for it, but it was a big, big service. I mean, they did lots of advertisement, and I didn't have a problem with it, but I think I dropped the service because I was most of my cronies that I hang out with were talking about how great Backblaze is. And it is, and it's, priced pretty well. But when you do these cloud services where you're storing your whole computer on there, it's not like it's making well, it is making a copy of all the files on your computer, but it's done through Wi-Fi, so it takes a long time. So when you first press the button, you might have to leave your computer on, or at least if it is on, Carbonite is Eric just sent me a message on that. Carbonite was the service that I used for a long time. But when you first use these services, could take a week to get everything so it is a mirror of what's on your device at home. It doesn't mean you have to turn it off, but every time you turn it on, it'll continue to do the matching, the mirroring of the files. So I'm using Backblaze as a offsite cloud storage. I also use a couple of, again, we're getting into overkill here. I also use a couple of offsite that I put on SSD drives. Carbon Copy Cloner or Super Duper are 2 programs that are Mac-based. I think Carbon Copy Cloner might have a Windows-based version too. I'm not sure. But it's a app that will do that complete backup and we'll make bootable drives for you. And so that's very cool. Now, what happens is every time they change and upgrade the software, there's a delay between when those bootable drives and when that software can work with the new version of the operating system that you're loading. But it's been pretty consistent, and both of those are pretty good programs. I also do an on-site. Eric, you can't see it, but it's sitting behind me on a table. I have a Synology NAS. Synology is like a tiny box that you can slam hard drives into, and it is threaded in the sense that not everything is stored on every drive, but it's shared across the drives that you put in there. So if there is a drive failure, you can pull the drive out, put a new clean drive in, and you won't lose any of what you've stored there. And it's connected through the internet instead of a hard connection, although it's sitting here in the back of my office. So if this office catches on fire, that's good as gone too, unless I run in and grab it. Luckily, there's only a couple of cables to make that thing go. So it will be on my mind. But it is a 16 terabytes, so I've got plenty of space for expansion. I can just dump things on there. It's not a mirroring system like Backblaze, so if my computer fails, I can just, and I get a new computer or the drive fails, I can hook it in and I can download everything from Backblaze. This is just archive storage of projects and things that I've worked on and video, but it is on site. As I said, I do SSDs. You can buy them for like a terabyte for $69 external drives that I can copy over projects on. I do have a Google Drive account, 1 terabyte. Again, a little overkill, but I work with a lot of stuff on Google Drive. But I now have multiple places to put projects that I don't want to lose. And then I also have iCloud Drive, which is, part of the Apple ecosystem. And I think I have 2 terabytes on a family plan on that. So lots of backup, lots of redundancy, which is really important. Try not to keep too much on my laptops that are not already stored in the cloud or synced to the cloud. So if those fail or those get stolen, I haven't necessarily lost my material in the cloud or projects that I'm working on.
Yeah, and it brings up two things for me. So the first is the organization. You need to know where you're putting stuff and how. So you need a good consistent system for that so you can find things, particularly if you're going to have multiple places things are stored. And I know it sounds like common sense, but I've had those days where I'm like, oh, where did I save this? When I should have saved it in the place I always do and didn't. So you need a good system, you need good organization and a good routine for when you clean out, right? When you're going to store things or archive things. The other thing is this SSD versus HDD. So HDD are your kind of older hard drives, the ones that you see or can hear that usually have a big fan. They're stored magnetically on HDDs. They don't tend to last as long. They take a lot more power consumption, but I've still seen them places being used. SSD is really the way to go. It lasts longer. It tends to be more stable. It's lighter, less power usage. I have, I think, 3 or 4 1 and 2 terabyte drives sitting around that I've used for video projects, for family photos, those types of things. And they're plug and play. They're easy to carry and take with you. So I have one specifically for just work stuff, development and Captivate. I have one for that. They're much easier to manage. If you do have an HDD drive that is in one of your towers or that you're using, always a good idea to back that up to an SSD. And the services Marty talked about are great too. I know MyCloud is another one that was popular for a little while. Not sure what they have that's new, but I'm going to check out Synology now that you mentioned it.
Well,
I think it's a good way to organize.
Synology is not an offsite storage
right
system.
For my physical drives, yeah.
For your physical drives, yeah, and it has that RAID sort of storage. So again, if a physical drive fails, you can replace it. It runs HHDs, but very high speed. So they have some specs on what you can put into the system. So I've had to purchase new hard drives because the standard ones, you have to be careful about which ones you purchase because the standard ones don't operate as well. I have them all as hard drives. I should probably look at more SSD drives and whether or not I can put those into my system and get a bay box that I can slide those SSDs in, or whether I need to look at another system. The thing about Synology is it's great. Everybody loves it once you get on it. There's lots of things that you can do with it, including creating your own web server, creating your own mail system, having and launching Microsoft Office apps from it as a remote kind of system, but they're expensive. The empty box is enough to scare a lot of people away. And then on top of that, you have to buy drives to put in it. And you have to buy expensive drives to put in it. So I used to have a Drobo, which was another one of those services. It was not a network accessed version of Drobo. And Drobo just kind of disappeared. I still have a Drobo with drives with lots of data sitting in my closet, but I'm looking at it recently and it said that Drobo products have been out of stock or severe inventory constraints in the Drobo store. As of January 27th, 2023, Drobo support and products are no longer available. So you got to make sure you've got something that's sustainable. But of course, my stuff is also backed up in the cloud. So, but Synology seems to be the product line that people are going for.
Yeah, see, this show always costs me money, Marty. Every time
Yep.
I end
It's
up
your
shopping.
money, not mine. I've already spent it. Do you have any final comments on this?
No, I think just making sure, again, that you have a good system for how you're going to do things, and like I said, this is one place where I think you need to pay, and you need to
Yeah.
invest because it's going to save you time and money, and it's going to help you ensure that things are secure. If you are working through a HIPAA platform, you need to ensure that whatever service you use has that is enabled for HIPAA and has an agreement that they support and have HIPAA level encryption in terms of storage. So, but like I said, usually that's managed by your EHR and not anything you should have to worry about at this point.
Yeah, for me, I wind up going to all the places and nooks and crannies where I've hidden things and wind up having to use the search to find the files that I'm looking at. So there are about 4 places I go to if I need to find some archival material. The Synology is one of them, and then I go to my cloud sites and generally find something there that I need. So you've got your original data on whatever device you're using. Consider 2 copies in a different cloud services or offsite in the sense that a cloud service is offsite. And then there's the old standard that if you're not using cloud services, then you should have a duplicate of your drive somewhere else in case your building burns down. I'm feeling less necessity of doing that because there's so much available for cloud services if you pay for it. And again, there's subscriptions. So it's a constant cost that you're paying for versus buying one drive once and moving it somewhere else. Backup, backup, backup. Don't be that person who has to go to somebody and say, my computer crashed and all the important stuff was on it. Can you help me?
The
At
irony is
least
also not lost on me that we're having this conversation while I can see the stack of paper exams behind you waiting to be graded.
I'm doing as much as I can to avoid grading. And if that means extending this show, I'll do it. But I think we've had our comments for the day. Email us at thepodtalknetwork.com or call us and leave a message at 330-333-1240. And we'll play your question in the podcast and try and get an answer for you. Our bumper music is from Philip Gross, Rast from the Free Music Archive. Everything you need to know is at techsavvyprofessor.net. You can find us by searching for us in Apple Podcasts, The Tech Savvy Professor. Look for us on Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play Music. Look for us on other shows like circularfiring-squad.net. That is our kind of chat show for academics. And then I'm also doing a show called Vision Profiles, which reviews kind of the weekly news about what's going on with Apple Vision Pro. And then we have developers and users coming on that are also helping us review those stories. But we had a developer on in a recent show. He makes virtual fish tanks, and it's really cool because you can just place them around while you have the headset on, place them around your virtual space. What was more interesting was the conversation he had about creativity and getting apps in the store, and you're always kind of looking over your shoulder to make sure someone's not doing your app, your idea already. So it's called Vision Profiles, and you can also find that in other podcast services. That's it for today. Thanks for subscribing to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast, and we'll see you next time.